the pronouncement of fuel subsidy removal on May 29th in President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's inaugural speech and the ripple effect on the economy and its attendant hardship. Life in Nigeria has not been the same. Although fuel subsidy removal, a long-drawn issue considered as a cancer that has eaten deep into the core of the nation, has been applauded by industry experts. Nigerians are feeling the pinch as cost of food items and other necessities of life has skyrocketed, making life difficult. Now, government is, however, not resting on its oars and leaving citizens to face it alone. And to ameliorate the sufferings of citizens, the government approved 5 billion naira grant to the 36 states and the FCT to address factors arising from the fuel subsidy removal through the procurement of grains as well as other items as part of measures to bring temporary relief to Nigerians as a result of the high cost of living. These palliatives is meant for vulnerable Nigerians affected by the attendant result of the subsidy removal. Now, what are the short, medium and long-term measures to ease the hardship? What are governments at the subnational level doing to implement and distribute palliative to the most vulnerable? What is the expected outcome of the palliative distribution nationwide? These and more we shall examine tonight with my guest, Dr. Mohammed Goji, Executive Secretary, Yobe State Emergency Management Agency, and Ephraim Audu, an economist and the Executive Director, Agricultural Agenda. I am Jummai Yusuf. Now the news. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has directed the recall of all career and non-career ambassadors from their duty post worldwide. The President's directive is sequel to his careful study of the present state of affairs at Nigerian consulate offices and embassies worldwide, and in line with the President's renewed hope agenda. The President is determined to ensure that world-class efficiency and quality will henceforth characterize foreign and domestic service delivery to citizens, residents, and prospective visitors alike. Special Advisor to the President on Media, Ajuri Ngelale, notes that the President further directs that Nigeria's United Nations permanent representatives in New York and Geneva be exempted from this total recall in view of the upcoming United Nations General Assembly holding later this month. By the directive of the President, the recall of the affected officers takes immediate effect. The Minister of Works, David Umahi, is proposing a new target for contractors handling federal road projects across the country, where they will sign a written agreement stipulating that roads constructed by them will last for at least 30 years. The minister stated this when he paid homage on the Oni of Ife at his palace during his inspection of federal roads in Osun State. Femi Afariagun has the details.
Of his inspection of federal roads in Southwest, the Minister of Works, David Umahi, inspected Mayfair Junction, Lagere, Iwemo, and Nua Ilesha Bypass Road in Osun State. Starting from Ilefe, the 22-kilometer road project, awarded in the year 2010, is just at 46% completion due to inadequate budgetary allocation and unresolved compensation to houses demolished. At the palace of Oni of Ife, Obainito Ogunwusi, the minister lamented the rate at which road projects fail, promising to ensure speedy completion of the project.
And within 5 years, the road is gone. So there's no nation that can progress with this kind of arrangement. You know, we are just going round. You know, so much, motions and yet no movement. So people are, frustrating me by giving me very unreasonable concrete price. I will not stop them from doing asphalt, but there must be a commitment. For 30 years, the road will not fail.
The Oni of Ife, Obainito Ogunwusi, appealed to federal government to speed up work on the road.
We've done, I went to supervise it myself.
You've done already?
Done. No issue concerning that. It's embarrassing.
It's a parody.
I see it like a war-torn environment.
The minister also inspected part of Ibadan-Ife Ilesha Expressway. Femi Afariogun, NTA News.
A collapsed fence from an evening rainstorm has claimed the lives of 4 young siblings in the coal camp area of Enugu. Chimaroke Ugo reports that the children with their widowed mother reside in a structure said to be approved for poultry farming.
The tragic incident occurred at about 4:30 on Friday evening, following the collapse of a fence on the building as a result of heavy rainfall. The 44-room building houses many, including a recently widowed petty trader and her 6 children. Only 2 of the children currently receiving treatment with her in the hospital survived.
The excess of the rain now affected the fence, our own fence. Then the water from the other building pulled down our own fence, then and smashed the building, our own house, then which affected children inside their room. Then the 3 girls and 1 boy could not come out alive.
My sister had 6 children, and as I'm talking to you now, 4 children are dead.
Both the fence and the building situated in a valley are visibly poorly constructed and unfit for human habitation. In Enugu, Chimaroke Ugu, NTA News.
Talking legal matters, legal practitioners in the country are positive that the current challenges being experienced in the country would eventually lead to a glorious new dawn of prosperity if everyone cooperates and support government's efforts at lifting the standards of the citizenry. The Nigerian Bar Association gave this indication at the end of its annual conference in Abuja. Olabode Arewa reports.
Apparent on the faces of the legal minds here is the seriousness of the matters they have come to put in the public space. Their usual practice is to address judges in court, but the leadership of the NBA is now talking to the public, using the media as a platform.
Conference identified the need for greater investment in the military, including providing support for civil-military coordination framework, as well as comprehensive endowment framework for critical military facilities and equipment.
Issues of economic development of the nation, security matters, and the enhancement of the rule of law were the main concerns of the NBA.
Conference notes that every aspect of the infrastructure of our justice system requires fundamental rethinking, including our approaches to policing, adjudication, bail, sentencing, and imprisonment. There was also a call for adherence to judicial decisions.
Going forward, the NBA says it is stepping up advocacy for better remuneration for judicial officers and lawyers in practice. Olabode, NTA News.
The Nigerian Police Trust Fund has successfully enhanced the capacity of more than 7,000 personnel of the force and also completed the construction and rehabilitation of some police formations between 2021 and 2022, with some still ongoing. Leadership of the Trust Fund at a briefing in the Ministry of Police Affairs re-emphasized its commitment to continue to deepen the realization of the agency's interventionist mandate for the Nigeria Police Force. Francis Form tells us more.
The project and program of NPTF are implemented based on the need assessment from the Nigerian Police Force, along with NPTF Act 2019.
This is the first time the leadership of the Nigeria Police Trust Fund is meeting with the Ministers of Police Affairs. Established with the mandates to intervene in giving the police a befitting operational assistance and guidance, the Trust Fund is here meeting the supervising ministers to brief them on the journey so far.
The Trust Fund executed 173 projects across the country. The project includes construction of newly 37 number of offices and barracks of Nigerian police, rehabilitation of 110 number police offices and barracks, fresh construction of 13 number of perimeter fence for Nigerian police offices and barracks across the country, provision of 13 number other critical infrastructure for the Nigerian police, including roads, access roads, etc. On the implementation status, all the training programs have been successfully executed.
Similarly, the NPTF has also procured 74 Buffalo trucks, 16 utility vehicles, 12 operational Hilux van, 1,200 bulletproof vests and helmets, branded raincoats, and the rehabilitation of the NPF helicopter to boost operational capability.
It is instructive to note at this junction that one of the major challenges experienced by the trust fund since inception was the delay in the passage of trust fund budget.
Responding to funding issues on the professional training for police personnel outside the country, the Police Affairs Minister urged NPTF to ensure that the process of training officers is strictly managed within the available funds rather than keeping it in view.
This will require comprehensive training and capacity building programs for our officers. Additionally, investing in technology for surveillance and crime prevention will greatly enhance our capabilities in maintaining law and order.
We look forward to working as a team to actualize the renewed hope policing agenda collectively through sustained funding, which is critical.
The NPTF has put in place a medium-term strategy to ensure that all officers and men of the Nigeria Police Force are mobilized for training and retraining at least once in every 3 years. Francis from NTA News.
The Nigerian Army will remain professional, disciplined, and committed to the Nigerian project by protecting its territorial integrity against internal and external aggression. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tawhid Labaja, gave the assurance while addressing troops of Sector 2 Joint Task Force Northeast Operation Hadinkai, Damaturu, in continuation of his tour to the Northeast Theatre of Operations and Army formations in the country. Mustafa Yusuf reports.
The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tawhid Labaja, arrived in Damaturu, the Yobe State capital, via Maiduguri. In line with the military tradition, the Chief of Army Staff then inspected the Guard of Honor mounted by soldiers of Sector 2 Joint Task Force Northeast Operation Hadinkai, Damaturu. Addressing the troops, the Army Chief stated that his visit to the Theatre of Operations in Northeast is to reassess, revigorate, and ginger troops fighting Boko Haram insurgents in the region. General Labaja, who took note of the challenges the troops are facing in prosecuting the war against enemies of the state, gave his commitment to do more to address identified operational impediments.
And I'm back now to go around the theater, especially the sector headquarters, to listen to briefs from the commanders on the ground so that I can appraise the challenges that confront them and address them quickly in order to make the formations and units of the Nigerian Army deployed in the field to be more effective and bring about the desired stability.
A strategic engagement between the Chief of Army Staff and Yobe State Deputy Governor Idi Borde Gobana at the Government House Damaturu centers around the need for enhanced synergy to mop up remnants of Boko Haram terrorists in Gaidam general area and other areas with sporadic incidences. In Damaturu, Mustafa Yusuf Musa, NTA News.
In the face of increased prosecution of persons with questionable sources of wealth by the anti-graft agencies in the country, civil society organizations have expressed concern over its negative effect on the nation's psyche and advocate close monitoring of public procurement undertaken by NDAs, having identified these as responsible for about 70% of all frauds in Nigeria. At a strategic roundtable on procurement corruption held in Abuja, they made a case for the inauguration of the National Council for Public Procurement to enhance the fight against corruption.
The invitation of key stakeholders to this meeting is informed by the rising cases of corruption that appears to have defied all forms of prescriptions, despite huge investment both in human and material resources to fight the menace.
In addition, the Procurement Act, by the provisions laid by the Bureau of Public Procurement, requires MDAs to publish their procurement transactions in the procurement portal NOCOPO.
If the people involved in executing procurement processes in Nigeria are not certified and qualified,
The roundtable also made recommendations on actualizing the Executive Order 5 signed by the President. The emphatic feeling that drove Gombe State government to assist the poor and vulnerable in the wake of inflation in the country due to removal of subsidy on fuel is helping the people cope with the economic new normal. NTA's Emmanuel Akila traced the Gombe State Palliative Committee to places where the assistance to the people who need them most are distributed.
Our efforts to mitigate the economic hardships.
When he inaugurated the Gombe State Palliative Committee, Governor Muhammad Ino Yahaya charged them to identify the beneficiaries with priority to the poor and vulnerable to give them assistance to cushion the impact of the inflation in the wake of the petrol subsidy removal. The assistance come at the right time.
I want to take this opportunity to thank the Excellency Alhaji Muhammadu Ino Yahaya because of that palliative.
Each of the 420,000 persons in the Gombe State planned distribution of palliatives took some 2 bags of fertilizer, 1 carton of macaroni pasta, 2 liters of herbicide, and 5 kilogram bag of rice to meet their immediate food need and to ensure sustainable agricultural production. With the federal government's intervention now in the key of states, Gombe State sets a machinery in motion to give more succor to the people.
The Deputy Governor will take charge of ensuring that we implement the federal government palliative so that it gets to the right destination.
As directed, the committee goes beyond the local government headquarters to the ward and unit levels to deliver the palliatives to the indigents irrespective of political party affiliations. The state government approves salary increase of 10,000 naira to the state and local government workers. The payment begins from the month of August 2023. In Gombe, Emmanuel Akila, NTA News.
Kano State Governor Abba Kabiru Yusuf has described Nigeria's Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, as a gentleman of proven integrity, intellect and wisdom, whose visionary and exemplary leadership has positively impacted on the lives of millions of Nigerians over the years. This was contained in a letter of felicitation signed by the governor to the Vice President as he clocks 57 years today. Governor Yusuf expressed optimism on the capacity of Shettima to provide enormous contributions towards general development of the country, as demonstrated during his 2-term tenure as the governor of Borno State. Governor Abu Bashir Kabir Yusuf wishes the VP's good health and God's guidance in all his endeavors. This is Weekend File. More reports to set the tone for our discussion segment when we return. Don't go away. You're welcome back. Government at all levels are expected to make provisions to improve the living standard of its people, especially social amenities for the people. The recent removal of fuel subsidy by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to save the country from corruption in the oil and gas sector was applauded across the globe. But Nigerians are going through so much hardship. Correspondent Ilyasu Yakubu examines the provisions of palliatives by the federal government to cushion the effect of the removal of fuel subsidy.
Over the years, successive governments initiated the subsidy regime to enable Nigerians buy petroleum products at an affordable rate. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu took the difficult but most courageous decision of removing the subsidy and announced the provision of palliatives to cushion the effects of the removal on Nigerians.
For several years, I have consistently maintained the position that the fuel subsidy had to go. This once beneficial measure had outlived its usefulness.
Each state of the Federation was given 5 billion naira to provide food for the people. This is in addition to the mandate granted the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, to provide other palliatives to vulnerable Nigerians.
This intervention is also expected to drive the sustainable socio-economic resilience of the targeted, most vulnerable individuals.
Governors across the country have keyed into the plan to alleviate the sufferings of their people.
But I want to see you chairman and overseers sharing these things clearly so it goes to the people.
To bring an end to the difficulties occasioned by the removal of fuel subsidy, The federal government has promised to fix the Port Harcourt refinery by December this year to rekindle the hope of all Nigerians. In Abuja, Ilyasu Yakubu, NTA News.
The Borno palliative distribution model has been a consistent exercise for many years to reduce the burden of humanitarian crisis as a result of displacement of communities and families from the 13 years of insurgency. This time, food distribution by Borno and Yobe state government is coming at an unprecedented scale to arrest food shortages, increasing prices of commodities and other factors occasioned by the petroleum subsidy removal, now supplemented by the federal government intervention. Abubakar Musa reports.
Alhamdulillah ya rike mu sakansa da Allah. Ya ƙara girma ya ƙara matsayi ubangiji Allah ya kare shi.
These are rural dwellers, mostly IDPs, returnees and members of host communities in hard-to-reach areas of Baga, Doro and Cross Kawa around the Lake Chad in northern Borno, Damboa and Goza in the south, receiving food palliative, with Governor Zulum leading most of the exercise. Borno State had initially earmarked 300,000 households for the food palliative, with an additional 100,000 from the federal intervention. It is expected to reach 2.4 million beneficiaries statewide.
We have identified the most vulnerable population in Borno State, especially in southern Borno. We have Damboa local government, we have Goza local government. These are two of the local government areas that are severely affected by food shortage. While in northern Borno, almost all the local government areas in northern Borno, apart from Kaga, Magumeri and Gubio, will benefit from the scheme.
Out of the 2,000 given in each ward, we have categorized based on the director of His Excellency, that is 500 must come from the vulnerable people.
In the rural communities, especially those affected by insurgency and hard to reach, the State Palliative Committee remain on ground for days to ensure every item is distributed to avoid diversion or sharp practice. In Yobe State, the distribution of the palliatives for the 17 council areas was flagged off in 3 selected local government of Damaturu, Damagum and Jakusko.
Already we have started receiving consignment from the federal government.
The statewide food distribution exercise in Yobe is targeting more than 80,000 vulnerable households. In Maiduguri, Abubakar Musa, NTA News.
And meanwhile, for an update from Yobe State Governor Mai Mala Buni has reaffirmed his total commitment on equitable distribution of palliatives across the state. The committee set up by the governor has so far distributed palliative to 4 local government areas covering 18,544 households. This is about 92,000 individual beneficiaries out of 400,000 households targeted in the state to cushion the hardship amongst residents as a result of fuel subsidy removal. Now, this report sets the tone for our interview segment, and I have 2 guests tonight, and Mohammed Goji, Executive Secretary, Yobe State Emergency Management Agency. Dr. Mohammed Goji, you're welcome to Weekend File. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I also have in the studio Ephraim Audu, an economist and the Executive Director, Agricultural Agenda. You're welcome to Weekend File.
Thank you very much.
Let me begin with Dr. Goji. Can you give us an overview of palliative put together to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal?
Thank you very much. From Yobe State, when the decision to remove the fuel subsidy was made by the President, and subsequently in line with the renewed agenda of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to cushion the hardship the public are facing, the decision to support communities with palliatives was made. Immediately, His Excellency Governor Mai Mala Buni directed His Excellency the Deputy Governor to immediately convene the Committee for Palliative in the state, which SEMA is implementing a key component of that palliative support. So part of the strategy we deploy is, 1, to first identify our stock reserve. What do we have in stock? 2, to look at the most vulnerable at the moment. And based on our definition, as directed by the governor, the most vulnerable one are the IDPs, then person living with disability. Then we go to the vulnerable population, looking at the elderly, the women-headed household, the divorcee, and down to teachers, commuters, unions of drivers, youth, students, and others. So we categorize all the vulnerable population. But of course, we cannot support them if we don't review our stock value. After reviewing our stock value, we started initially with supporting only persons living with disability at the early stage of the fuel subsidy removal. Thereafter, there was strong communication between our office, the state government, and the federal government in terms of federal government palliative support. And interestingly, we were among the first states that started receiving the early five trucks of rice. Immediately they came into the state, His Excellency Deputy Governor flagged up the distribution. But in the distribution, what we do is we target the beneficiaries directly. We go to their house, we engage independent assessment team because of the advantage we have with presence of United Nations organizations. We have that experience of doing assessment on time. We did the assessment, we reviewed our register, and we profiled them. We picked the most vulnerable of the vulnerable because as palliative, it cannot reach everybody. So it was flagged up in the state capital, and we continued to the 4 LGS that has been mentioned earlier. And based on the projection of the items we are expected to receive from the federal government and the one that's already in stock at the state level, we are targeting not less than 400,000 households. And that will impact at least 1.8 million persons, individual persons, when you take an average of 4.5 persons per household according to the average UN standard of household size. So, and interestingly, during the distribution, we have steps that we follow. After we get the register, enumerated the beneficiaries, we go and do stakeholders engagement. We call all relevant stakeholders in the community, traditional rulers, religious leaders, leaders of Union of Transport, NATO, NURT, and political party leaders. We invited PDP, NNPP, and all the political parties in our community. We send them letter, they acknowledge, they come to the meeting. And we clearly explain to them that as the governor directed, this is not a political matter. This is directive of the president, and it must be implemented to the latter, and it must reach the most vulnerable. So we presented the data to them. These are the beneficiaries per community. These are the community leaders. We asked them, have you seen our assessment team in your community? Some confirm, some they say they didn't see them. We read out the names to them, and they go and validate the names. After validation, they will clearly inform them that we are distributing so kilogram of food basket per household. It's either grain or rice. In some cases, we give them some condiments in terms of salt and cubes and seasoning. We clearly.
That is accountability from the people telling you how much what they have and how much was given to them. I'll come back to you on other issues. Let me bring in Ephraim Audu. He's an economist. Ephraim Audu, 2 out of 5 billion naira, 2 billion has been given. And as an agriculturalist, you know how much the cost of living has gone up and how expensive food items are. Is it enough?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, may I, on a special note, appreciate Mr. President for this swift action of enhancing palliatives across board, across the 36 states of the Federation. Now, it will be very, very correct to say that the 2 billion naira that has already been disbursed out of the 5 billion naira that each state is entitled to is certainly not enough. Certainly not enough. Permit me to
go ahead.
Relatively discuss historically.
Okay.
In order to get this point as appropriate. In 2019, President Muhammadu Buhari released the total sum of 614 billion naira as palliatives to the 36 states of the Federation. Then in 2021, exactly 656 billion naira was also released for palliatives. So far, from the removal of the fuel subsidy currently, okay, about 69 billion naira has already been disbursed. Okay? So now, as you can see, from the record from the Debt Management Office, we understand that the accumulated debt that the 36 state governors have already accumulated from the budgeted support facility of the federal government had already got about 1.3 trillion. 1.3 trillion.
That's a huge number.
Quite huge. So now, and from the last speaker, you understand it's obvious that even if the federal government released the sum of 20 to 50 billion naira per state, it was certainly not going to be enough due to one or two factors: transparency, accountability, and any other factors put together. So far, from what I've said earlier, I will put it to you that the already released 2 billion naira will rather create a lot of social vices and uprising across board, because we've seen it as relevant stakeholders. I can bet you that politicians are already hijacking these palliatives.
Ephraim, well, we'll come to that after this break. Dr. Goje, Ephraim, we'll be back with more conversation. Don't go away. You're welcome back, and you're watching Weekend File. Let's take more reports to push the conversation. Rivers State government has set up a committee for effective disbursement of the federal government-approved 5 billion naira palliative across the 36 states. The action was undertaken to provide temporary relief to the high cost of living as a result of the subsidy removal. Ijoma Ungweki reports.
The impact of removal of fuel subsidy has been overwhelming across the nation, but Rivers State government started early interventions by providing free buses. This move residents of Port Harcourt describe as a welcome development.
It's helping to reduce the cost of transportation.
With the federal government's approval of the 5 billion naira palliative to be distributed across the 36 states, Rivers State Governor Siminalaye Fubara constituted a state palliative committee which comprises chairmen of the 23 local government areas. The committee will work with traditional rulers, chiefs and family heads. This is to ensure everyone is carried along in the distribution process.
I believe that you know what to do, because it is not a party affair. It's something that the federal government, through the Nigerian Governors Forum, is using to support the suffering masses.
With the present economic challenges, there are concerns from different quarters about effective monitoring to ensure the items get to the targeted persons.
As a matter of, urgency, let it be that we try to address, especially the foodstuff that has been made available, let it go to the real vulnerable.
There are categories of poverty. How will they get to the hinterland, the communities? How will they get to the riverine areas? Consult several agencies so that they can help you.
Experts advocate revamping of the economy, fixing of the refineries and increase in salary of workers. In Port Harcourt, Ijomu Gweke, NTA News.
And state governments in the southeast have swung into action to ensure effective and even distribution of the federal government palliative to states to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal. Chidi Okorafor reports that in Enugu and Ebonyi states, committees charged with the responsibility were urged to discharge the duty with transparency to those in dire need of them.
As part of measures to mitigate the impact of the fuel subsidy removal, the federal government approved the sum of 5 billion naira to each state of the federation to complement the effort of the federal government in that regard. Enugu State Governor Peter Mba inaugurated Palliatives Distribution Committee with the mandate to ensure transparency and speedy distribution of the palliatives. Part of the palliatives to support the people of the state is to provide mass transit buses and other measures.
The state have evolved a strategy to make sure that this amount of money gets to the people destined for it. The very essence of integrity, the traditional ruler and people of repute, so that they will outline the names of persons, cross-checked with the ones we already have.
So right now, the committee is still working out the modalities.
So as soon as these modalities is concluded, now the people, these palliatives will be shared.
Enugu State Commissioner for Human Development and Poverty Eradication added that the state government will soon commence the distribution of palliatives, stressing government's decision to decentralize the management of the palliative. Residents commended the government for the initiative and called for speedy rollout of the palliatives in Enugu. Chidi Okrafo, NTA News.
Thank you, Chidi. And back to our conversation, I still have with me Dr. Mohammed Goje, Executive Secretary, Yobe State Emergency Management Agency, and Ephraim Audu, an economist and Executive Director, Agricultural Agenda. Mr. Ephraim, before we went on the break, you talked about hijacking and corruption in the process, but I need to put it to you that from the body language of the Tinubu administration, accountability is key, and I'm sure there will be effective monitoring of the distribution of the palliatives across the state. Now, let me bring in Mohammed Goje. Let's talk about the easy ways of getting these food items, these grains to the people, because flood disaster has sort of cut short production, farming in the farmlands, and a lot of farmers are going through a lot of problems right now. So how were you able to get the grains and other amenities that you have given to the people?
Thank you very much. For us in Yobe State, because of our experience of the age-long crisis of Boko Haram and support to displaced population, IDPs, and working with United Nations and other organizations, that has prepared our mind and our mindset. That was why during the COVID-19 palliative, our state was one of the first states that was able to distribute all the commodities on time to the beneficiaries. And coming to this one, what we deployed is, of course, our governor is mindful of the fact that our communities are affected by 2022 flood. They are just recovering. And this has also compounded with the fact that some communities that have returned home following the safety and reclaim of their communities by security men, they are also trying to come up with opportunities to plant their crops despite the limited access to land due to security issues. So these are issues that compounded and resulted in us to push forward to ensure that this palliative reach the beneficiaries. Of course, federal government, we have our stocks on ground, and His Excellency has directed all available options to mobilize resources. Use our network at the community levels through the traditional rulers, through the community leaders to do enumeration. But most interesting is the fact that after the enumeration, beneficiaries must be targeted directly. Of course, we can't reach all beneficiaries, but for us in the communities, we know how important these 2 billion or 5 trucks of rice sent in by the president or by the governors is making difference. No matter how small, it stimulates the livelihood in the community, and the people in the community are the most needed. When we give them the food items, we see the smiles in their faces, and we know how it feels. But because of accountability, we ensure that the distribution must be directly, despite the challenges and the constraint. We go to their community, we divide the communities based on location, based on geographic location, and we go there, invite and give them directly. And we have our accountability process instituted. We validate beneficiaries, most of them based on phone numbers, some through the traditional leaders. Of course, majority of our locations are connected to telephone now. Most of the beneficiaries, they have either direct phone numbers or phone numbers of their children and their siblings. And what other aspect that we use is to use a cluster. Person living with disability cluster, teachers cluster, student cluster, and the general vulnerable population cluster. And they are cooperating. When you see how they come and receive items, you know that they are making that impact. But the other thing we do is we have groups and associations that are known through their leadership. We invite Nigerian Labour Congress to identify some of them. We invite the Union of Road Transport Workers to validate some of the list. So these are the options that we use. But of course, it may not reach to everybody, but the more the food basket is being circulated in that community,
Dr. Goje,
the more it lessens the pressure.
Dr. Goje, before I bring him Ephraim Audu, what is the short, medium, and long-term solution to to the hardships Nigerians are going through right now, and what can your state do?
In our state, the approach is in 5 components. Health, we're looking at options. His Excellency is looking at the options of providing premium healthcare package to at least 500 vulnerable persons per LGA, that they will access free healthcare for 1 year. In terms of agric, there's the agric stimulus through fertilizer from the federal government and the one that the state government has subsidized. Through transport system, the next phase is for the government to institute a state-owned institution and the federal institution in the state to ease the transport system for students in those institutions. Then in terms of humanitarian, is the palliative that we're giving in short term. And the palliative will be continuous in phases. Federal government will give in, local government will provide, state government will provide, and we have called all our INGOs and UN organizations in the state to key into this policy of ensuring that palliative is being provided back to back. In the medium term, the plan is to stimulate the economy. How do we stimulate the economy? To ensure that small business holders have been given access to loan by the state government so that that loan will facilitate their day-to-day activities. There's options of government liaison. Yobe State has the largest number of trucks in northern Nigeria. That's why we have the biggest trailer park that's being constructed by Yobe State government. So government is looking at options of liaising with the trailer union to ensure that commodities brought into the state for our business holders are subsidized so that they bring in the items and the cost will be subsidized. In the long term, the plan is to invest heavily in agriculture. We have vast arid land. And
Dr. Goje, we're running out of time, but I want you to tell me something. Have you heard anything about anybody hijacking any of these palliatives? Briefly, in 30 seconds.
And in 30 seconds, well, of course, there wasn't any report of any hijack of any palliative so far that we have received. But what we do is, through the Office of the Security Advisor to His Excellency, we have communicated to all security agencies. That's why whenever we go, we ensure that we validate through phone number. For any item that they see in the market, that they assume or they presume that it is part of the palliative, they should report to the security advisor. And for beneficiaries, we have a feedback and toll-free number that for every distribution point, we place the number in local language and in our language so that they will call in the event that they assume their item is being diverted. We're just starting, and we hope we'll.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed Goje, Executive Secretary, Yobe State Emergency Management Agency. Thank you so much for coming on Weekend File. Now back to the studio. Ephraim Audu, you raised a pertinent question there. Who should be held accountable in case of hijacking and corruption of these food items to the people?
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Ahmed had made a critical point, so I must applaud the model that the Yobe State government have adopted. Kudos to them. So now, of course, the federal government and the respective governors will be held responsible. Okay? So now, when we talk about palliatives, we must be very careful on the way these palliatives are distributed. It has to be equitably distributed, meaning all stakeholders, such like the civil society organizations, the relevant stakeholders within the organized private sector, need to be properly engaged, and real orientation has to be given to members of the public as to that regard.
Okay.
As I said earlier, these palliatives have been hijacked, and we have feedbacks. There has been series of diversion of such. Okay, so now.
So what should be done?
Excellent.
Should there be a database, for vulnerable Nigerians? What should be done? Because the federal government has done what it needs to do by giving the money. It remains for the states to decide how to do it.
All right. First of all, I will want to call on a very strong synergy between the state government and the federal government. You will not talk about solving the problem of hunger in Nigeria without tackling the issue of security. I bet you what triggered this alarming rate of hunger in Nigeria is due to insecurity, because these farmers could no longer have access to their farms. Okay? So now, to cushion this effect is beyond distributing daily bread. It's beyond giving the indigent mudus or cups of rice and as well a bit of maize, okay? What you need to do is to...
But we've seen bags and cartons of spaghetti, bags of rice and all that in some states, not just a cup.
Of course, the more you see, the less you understand. But the critical advice here, I expect that every state of the Federation should be able to deploy not less than 200 mass transport buses, where 50% discount will be given to the citizenry and indigenes in order to cushion this effect. Okay, because I bet you the transportation cost is alarming.
Yes, it is.
Then the federal government has to go back to its social register and engage real sector farmers. There is what we call the smallholders farmers, which I know the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, the Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment, Smedan has over 40 million database of MSMEs.
Okay.
Identify these stakeholders, farmers, adopt what we call the outgrowers model, supply them with farm inputs, improve seedlings, ensure proper security, let them be able to go out to farms. You will see multiplying effects that will supersede the current method that the federal government is adopting.
Dr. Ephraim, we're really running out of time. Thank you so much for coming on this program. I'm sure it's a continuing conversation, this palliative issue. Thank you so much for coming on Weekend File. Ephraim Audu, an economist and executive director, Agricultural Agenda. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Take a break. Don't go away. You're welcome back, and that's Weekend File for this week. Thanks for watching. I am Jummai Yusuf.